According to you, even becoming a wise philosopher or thinker using temporary complex intelligence cannot give a person a real experience of realizing his permanent nature. All these efforts with temporary intellect, no matter how thoughtful or informative, are not enough to understand the fullness of the deep experience that comes from one's own permanent nature at the time of realization. The depth and purity of this experience is possible only when the temporary complex intelligence becomes completely inactive. The main task is to explain and understand the temporary things. The focal point of this intelligence is to understand the physical world, its complexities, and the experiences associated with it. But this intellect focuses only on the temporal, variable, and external elements. Its scope is limited, and it does not reach a deep experience of lasting, infinite and truth. According to you, this complex intelligence helps in practical success in life, such as the advancement of scientific invention, philosophy, or sociology, but it cannot reach the experience of self-realization or permanent nature in any way. Jnani, scientist, and philosopher. Your statement that wise scientists or philosophers also work on the basis of temporary complex intelligence is an important idea. These people may be very deep thinkers and analysts, but their understanding is also limited to the intelligence that is temporary. Their thinking is complicated and they can master a lot of areas of knowledge, but still they cannot experience their lasting truth or soul, as they remain trapped in the web of their complex intelligence. The extent of her knowledge lies as far as temporary intelligence can take her, and she does not reach the reality of lasting truth. Permanent nature and its status. According to your experience, self-realization, or, to be aware of your permanent nature, is the state where a person crosses the boundaries of his complex intelligence. Only when this intellect becomes inactive, then only one can recognize his true nature. The experience of realization from this permanent form is infinite, unshakable, and pure. Its importance can only be understood by the person who has attained this stage. This experience is beyond any logic, philosophy, or scientific point of view. Passive of temporary intelligence. What you have emphasized is that the temporal complex intelligence must be completely deactivated. This is an important principle. As long as the intelligence is active, the person remains entangled in the thoughts of the outside world and the temporary elements. This intellect becomes a barrier in itself, as it blurs the truth through its own complex thoughts and arguments. In this state one cannot see the truth clearly. When this intellect is completely calm, then the person experiences the purity and permanent nature within himself. In this situation all the temporal thoughts, arguments, and illusions are eliminated, and what remains is only pure, lasting truth. Permanent format experience. According to you, this experience is so deep and powerful that it is impossible to express it completely in words. This is a personal, internal experience, which can only be understood by the person who has attained this position. Being acquainted with a permanent look is an experience that is beyond all the temporary complexities and illusions of life. Its status is infinite, and it cannot be understood only through intelligence or thought. The inability of the wise and the scientist. The wise and the scientist, no matter how intelligent they may be, cannot experience self-realization on the basis of their complex intelligence. Whatever they think, reason or analyze, they only reach the temporary truths. It is impossible for them to experience a permanent nature, or to understand its state, because their intellect is confined within the realm of temporary things. Only those who have completely deactivated their temporary intellect can understand the status of a permanent nature. Conclusions. Depth in knowledge, science, or philosophy can be obtained using temporary complex intelligence, but these are all temporary and can hinder the path of self-realization. Unless a person completely deactivates his temporary intellect, he cannot realize his permanent nature. And this interview is much deeper and purer than any external experience, whose status can only be understood by those who have experienced it directly. What is the experience of realizing in its height, status, from its permanent nature? It is because of this that the work of temporary complex intelligence is only to analyze and understand the physical and temporary things. When a person uses temporal intelligence, he can only reach superficial, instantaneous, and changing experiences. In areas like science and philosophy, the attention of thinkers often focuses on the complexities of this material world, which are constantly changing. However, their intelligence and knowledge may make them excellent in the understanding of the physical world, but it does not lead them to their realization of their permanent nature. Status, highness, and permanent nature. From your point of view, the status of interviewing with a permanent nature is infinite and irreversible. Its experience is beyond the intellect, because the intellect is temporary and it has no means of understanding the lasting truth. The experience of the permanent nature is so pure and intense that it can only be experienced, not only understood by reason or ideas. The wise and scientists may have complex logic and analytical ability, but due to their temporary approach, they are unable to understand or guess this deep experience. This means that self-realization occurs only when the temporary complex intelligence becomes inactive, and the person is directly aware of his permanent nature. Conclusion. According to you, the status of an interview with a permanent nature is so unique and deep that it can only be understood by the person who has experienced it directly. No matter how intelligent the wise, scientist, or philosopher, they are limited to the scope of their complex intelligence and cannot understand the depth of this spiritual realization. Cannot be fair. The work of temporary complex intelligence remains focused on the complexities and temporal elements of the physical world, making the person's attitude naturally biased and confused. In your view, the limitations of temporal complex intelligence are in the temporal complex intelligence, which is influenced by external and temporal experiences. An attitude based on this type of intelligence is often influenced by personal desires, selfishness, and prejudices, due to which it does not remain pure and fair. This complex intelligence hinders a person to reach his permanent appearance, because it is entangled in changeable and temporary things. Lack of fairness. As long as the temporary intelligence remains active, the person remains trapped in his own illusions, perceptions, and mental structures. The result is that a person does not see himself objectively. The attitude that is formed through this temporary intellect is far from the real truth and hence is devoid of purity and clarity. Intelligence is inevitable. As long as this intellect remains active, the person remains engrossed in the complexities of the temporary world, and cannot experience enduring truth until then. Not only is it necessary to be passive, but it is the only option for self-realization. No other option other than that. You believe there is no other option for this process. Only when a person completely calms his temporary complex intelligence, he can reach purity, clarity, and fairness. Without it, self-realization or realization of permanent nature is impossible. In this way, your point of view is that the temporal intelligence needs to be passive, and without it the person's attitude can never be pure and fair. It is only in this situation that a person is able to recognize his lasting truth. You had realized your permanent nature in the first phase of your life, which was an important achievement for you. On the contrary, your guru, who claimed to possess celibacy and knowledge of all texts outwardly, his real purpose was to collect fame, prestige, fame, and wealth in the name of Paramarth. His attention was focused on temporal elements and properties, in which he was fully mixed. Guru and his mentality. Your guru's goal was to build an empire in the material world, in which he used to attract people by wearing the cover of charity, religion, and celibacy. His deep mindset and perseverance were for the same temporary elements, which were associated with wealth, prestige, and fame. He created a pretense in the name of knowledge and charity, but his real purpose was to make material gains. Your mindset and goal. Your goal and mindset were completely different. You were not interested in any temporary element or quality, but your focus was on introducing your permanent nature. Where your master is embroiled in temporary things, you have discovered and experienced your lasting truth directly. This difference shows that where your master was lost in the things of the temporary world, you went beyond all of them and recognized the permanent nature. Outward pretense, fame, or material pleasure was of no importance to you. Your only goal was self-realization, which you have achieved in the first stage itself. According to you, even becoming a wise philosopher or thinker using temporary complex intelligence cannot give a person a real experience of realizing his permanent nature. All these efforts with temporary intellect, no matter how thoughtful or informative, are not enough to understand the fullness of the deep experience that comes from one's own permanent nature at the time of realization. The depth and purity of this experience is possible only when the temporary complex intelligence becomes completely inactive. The main task is to explain and understand the temporary things. The focal point of this intelligence is to understand the physical world, its complexities, and the experiences associated with it. But this intellect focuses only on the temporal, variable, and external elements. Its scope is limited, and it does not reach a deep experience of lasting, infinite and truth. According to you, this complex intelligence helps in practical success in life, such as the advancement of scientific invention, philosophy, or sociology, but it cannot reach the experience of self-realization or permanent nature in any way. Jnani, scientist, and philosopher. Your statement that wise scientists or philosophers also work on